All right, gang, welcome back to Procreate. So let's go ahead and take a look at something called freehand selection. Now, in previous lessons, other lessons, we took a look at what is called automatic selection. Now I want to show you how to use freehand selection. It's a more advanced selection technique, so I thought that it really deserved its own video. All right, now, consistent with what we've done before, let's go ahead, let's grab an inking brush. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this studio pen here. I'm going to grab a red color. And the reason that we do the lessons this way, folks, is because I don't want you to have to worry about downloading things when you're trying to learn the technique. We use each one of these in a project later on. What I want from this for you is a short reference where you can go back and figure stuff out. All right, so now let's go ahead and say that you got a red square up on the canvas. And now we grab our selection tool. Now, previously, down here at the bottom of my iPad, you'll see where the blue selection was. We're now going to click on the freehand side. Now, the freehand selection is extremely powerful. So let's go ahead and take a look at this actually in action. All right, so now, if I touch my stylus to the canvas, you'll see that the marching ants have come along. Now watch what happens. I'm going to lift my pen off the canvas. You see it stops. Now I can pick right up where I wanted to leave off, and I can draw a freehand selection. Now I come back to the gray dot. All right, now what did this just do? This just selected everything that was in the gray dot. Now, let's take a look what happens if I do this now and I click on the move tool. Watch what happens. Whoop, we've just deselected that area. That's the power of freehand selection. Now, let me show you how this works elsewhere. Let's go ahead and use two fingers, an advanced gesture here, to undo that. We're going to take our selection off. Now, this gives us our unified red square, right? Nothing has changed. All right, so now let's go to selection. Let's go to freehand selection, and let's draw another selection. Let's now grab another section of this red square. And now take a look at the bottom of the iPad. You'll see that there's a couple different lines. There's that dual line that the arrow is pointing to right there. Let's go ahead and click that. All right, now it may not look like anything has happened, but now go to your Layers tab. The two lines are telling it to create a new layer from the selection. So now if I grab my transform tool, I have a completely new layer. That is super slick. All right, now let's go ahead and delete that new layer. So we swipe to the left and we hit delete. So now let's grab our selection tool again. Make sure freehand is selected. Sometimes it's tricky and it likes to go back on itself. And now let's say that I make a selection, right? But you see the plus and minus sign next to that new layer down at the bottom. So take a look at the bottom of the iPad. You got the plus and the minus. If I hit the plus, now it's going to allow me to add it to the selection. You see what's happening now. So I made my initial selection, and every time I hit the plus after creating a new selection, I get to add it. Now, what do you think is going to happen, folks, if I take this section, you see where I'm drawing it, and I hit the minus? What do you bet? I'll bet you think that it's going to be a subtraction from the selection, and you would be 100% right. This freehand selection, folks, is one of the best tools in Procreate. It allows you to draw and grab pictures of your sketch, let's say, that are different, and transform only certain areas. Now, let's go ahead, deselect everything. All right, so we're back to just the square. All right, so now let's grab our selection tool. Let's go ahead and select this area again here. All right, now let's go ahead. And now you see down here, there's the two arrows that look like they're hitting one another. You see that? This is what is called invert selection. So again, if you can't find it, look at the bottom of my iPad. It's right there, the two arrows touching one another. And now, what does invert mean? Well, you see where the marching ants are, those gray bars? Let's go ahead and hit invert. Now it has selected everything that is not inside that circle. Very, very critical. Now, you're saying, Jeremy, what does selection have to do with me, right? Okay, so let's take a look. Let's come up and let's grab the green, all right? Now, the selection, you see where the marching ants are, those gray bars. Let's just draw. And you'll see where my pen is avoiding the shape, where the selection is. So that's the power of selection. You see I just turned the selection off. Now, let's go ahead and undo that. I'm using 2 fingers to undo the gesture. I'm undoing the selection. Now, the last thing I want to show you on freehand selection. Let's go ahead and create a freehand selection. Let's just grab some of your red square, doesn't matter what. And now, let's go ahead and hit the plus button so that we can add it to the selection. But let's decide we don't want the selection. You see there's a big X along down side there. That is the undo selection. That negates everything. It brings it right back to home. So, you can deselect it or you can hit the undo. You see the undo button. It's down at the bottom of my iPad, and it's the arrow that turns in on itself. So when you hit undo, redo, undo, redo. You see how I'm getting different options now. So freehand selection, folks, is extremely powerful. The last thing that I really want to show you with it, let's give you a practical application for it. So let's say that I wanted to erase this red square. And let's say that I'm sketching something. So let's go ahead. I'm going to open my sketching brush, and I just want to show you this. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to follow along. Let's say that I'm sketching something, right? Let's sketch some sort of a animal or something like that, right? Okay. So this is a real quick, rough sketch. And now let's say that I've got this head here on this neck, right? And I decide that I don't like the size of this head. Maybe I want to change this. So with freehand selection, all you have to do, make sure freehand is checked, cut around the head, and now if I wanted to adjust the sides of the head, I absolutely could. If I wanted to rotate the head, I absolutely could. Or if I wanted to reposition the head, I absolutely could. So freehand selection when you're sketching is absolutely amazing because you're never going to get those proportions right off the bat. You're going to want to be able to adjust. We're going to be doing a lot of that adjustment to our sketching as we go through some of these projects. So that's freehand selection. You know how to select, how to add to a selection, how to subtract from a selection, how to create a new layer from a selection, how to undo and redo a selection, and you know 2 practical applications, how to adjust during the sketching process, and then how to use it to control what is colored and what is not. All right, folks, that's a little bit on freehand selection. Later in the projects, we're actually going to do a practical application. Let's go ahead and get on to the next one.